The narrative of the American homeowner is shifting dramatically from accumulating an asset to managing a rapidly growing liability trap. Amidst a frozen housing market, total U.S. household debt has surged to unprecedented levels, signaling a profound structural weakness. By the first quarter of 2024, collective household debt hit a record $17.69 trillion, driven largely by non-housing borrowing. Credit card balances alone saw considerable growth, indicating that consumers are bridging income gaps with high-interest revolving debt. This debt accumulation is occurring against the backdrop of a housing market paralyzed by the mortgage rate lock-in effect. Millions of homeowners secured historically low mortgage rates during the pandemic era, creating golden handcuffs that prevent mobility. Data shows that nearly 90% of existing mortgages have rates below 6%, with a substantial portion locked in under 4%. Current mortgage rates hovering near 7% make moving financially untenable for most, effectively freezing housing inventory. Consequently, the supply of homes for sale remains near historic lows, artificially propping up home prices despite affordability hurdles. Homeowners are trapped not by negative equity, as in 2008, but by the massive differential between their current and potential future borrowing costs. This paralysis masks a deeper issue: the rising holding costs of homeownership that are slowly eroding household financial stability. While principal and interest payments remain fixed for many, ancillary costs like insurance, taxes, and maintenance are exploding. Unable to access home equity cheaply, households are increasingly turning to credit cards to manage these unavoidable inflationary pressures. The Federal Reserve's aggressive rate hiking campaign aimed to cool inflation, but has instead gridlocked the residential real estate sector. This creates a bifurcated market where new buyers are priced out and existing owners are effectively trapped in place. The superficial stability of the housing market, defined by high prices and low turnover, hides growing financial distress underneath. The prevailing assumption that high home equity equates to financial security is being severely tested by liquidity constraints. We are witnessing the early stages of a cycle where fixed asset wealth is insufficient to cover rising variable living expenses. The convergence of record debt and frozen housing mobility creates a unique systemic risk profile for the U.S. economy. This setup suggests the potential for a delayed but significant wave of distressed selling should economic conditions deteriorate further. The critical disconnect lies between the record-high paper net worth of homeowners and their deteriorating liquidity. While balance sheets appear healthy due to inflated home values, actual cash flow is being strangled by non-mortgage factors. The cost of homeownership has silently decoupled from the fixed mortgage payment, introducing volatility into a supposedly stable asset. Insurance premiums have surged dramatically, particularly in key markets like Florida and California, often doubling or tripling annually. Simultaneously, property taxes are catching up to inflated assessments, adding hundreds of dollars to monthly obligations. These increases often result in escrow shortages, forcing lenders to unexpectedly hike monthly payments to cover the deficit. Consequently, millions of borrowers with fixed-rate loans are experiencing payment shocks historically associated with adjustable-rate mortgages. To bridge the gap between stagnant wages and rising costs, homeowners are increasingly tapping into home equity lines of credit. However, unlike primary mortgages, these HELOCs typically carry variable interest rates that track the federal funds rate. Borrowers who open lines at 4% are now facing rates exceeding 9% or 10%, drastically increasing debt servicing costs. This financial strain is already visible in rising delinquency rates for credit cards and auto loans across the middle class. We are seeing a resurgence of the house poor phenomenon, where asset richness hides severe income insufficiency. Unlike the 2008 crisis, which was precipitated by bad loans, this crisis is being incubated by the rising cost of holding good loans. The structural rigidity of the market means that when life events occur, divorce, job loss, or relocation, the impact is amplified. Homeowners forced to sell in this environment face a double penalty, losing their low rate and facing a thinner buyer pool. This dynamic creates a widening spread between what sellers need to get to break even and what buyers can afford to pay. In regions like Austin and parts of Florida, inventory is already ticking up as the holding cost pressure valve begins to release. The narrative of a perpetual housing shortage is being challenged by the reality of inventory hoarding rather than structural scarcity. As days on market metrics lengthen, the psychological certainty that home prices only go up begins to fracture. The market is currently in a standoff, but the leverage lies with the macroeconomic forces of inflation and interest rates, not the homeowner. The ultimate danger is not an immediate crash, but a long, slow stagnation where housing ceases to be a wealth generator. As transaction volumes remain suppressed, price discovery becomes unreliable, leaving many homeowners unsure of their true exit value. This uncertainty freezes capital that would otherwise flow into the broader economy, acting as a brake on national GDP growth. Furthermore, the lock-in effect is destroying labor market dynamism, as workers refuse to relocate for better jobs due to housing costs. This lack of mobility creates a structural inefficiency in the economy, mismatching talent with opportunity and stifling productivity. If a recession triggers widespread job losses, the protective wall of low mortgage rates will crumble under the weight of lost income. A forced seller cannot wait for the market to improve. They become the price setters, dragging comparable values down rapidly. Institutional investors, currently sitting on record levels of dry powder, are poised to acquire distressed assets at a discount. This transfer of ownership from individuals to corporations threatens to accelerate the transition toward a permanent rentership society. The erosion of homeownership as a mass-market savings vehicle fundamentally alters the retirement calculus for an entire generation. Young families are now facing a binary choice: overextend into a trap or remain on the sidelines as perpetual tenants. The Federal Reserve faces an impossible dilemma: cut rates to save the housing market and risk reigniting inflation. Or keep rates higher for longer, slowly strangling the debt-burdened consumer and forcing a deleveraging cycle. The historical precedent suggests that debt supercycles rarely resolve without significant pain and asset repricing. For the individual homeowner, the era of relying on passive appreciation to solve financial mismanagement is officially over. Survival in this new paradigm requires prioritizing liquidity and cash flow over the vanity metric of theoretical home equity. The trap is not just the debt itself, but the behavioral addiction to cheap leverage that fueled the last decade. Unwinding this addiction will define the next phase of the American economy, likely resulting in a decade of austerity. Recognizing the difference between an asset you own and a liability that owns you is the first step in avoiding the trap. In a landscape defined by debt and frozen liquidity, the most valuable position is flexibility, not maximum leverage.